Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Great to have with us one of the best in the business. Great respect for my good friend Dave Revsine, BTN. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. A little bit of a hectic day, but all good. How are you?
Doing great, and I won't take up too much time in this day, okay? Just a quick reaction on Kevin Warren staying in the area, but instead going to the Chicago Bears.
Well, I don't think particularly surprised, just given that the news has been circulating here for a couple weeks and hadn't really been shot down in any sort of meaningful way. So right. I think it's one of those situations where if it's out there that long, where no one at all actively tries to say this isn't the case, then you begin to believe that this is what's going to happen. So not surprised at the news that came down today. I was definitely surprised when I initially saw it. But, I guess it just kind of comes down to what kind of job it is that you want. And Kevin Warren accomplished a great deal here. It's hard to believe it's only been 3 years. It feels in some ways like it's been 15 just because of all the changes in college sports in this time and everything we've been through with pandemic and whatnot. But from that point of view, he certainly left his mark and has done a lot of really good things with the Big Ten. But his background is in the NFL, and the Bears is it's a really good opportunity for him as one who's a lifelong Bears fan and lives in Chicago. It does feel like this is a rare moment where the Bears actually have an opportunity to do something and to build positively, getting the number one pick. He was integral, as you probably know, in building the stadium in Minnesota, which was an incredible success on a lot of levels. They're trying to do something similar, it seems, here in Chicago with a new stadium for the Bears in the northwest suburbs. And so I just feel like this is easy for Kevin Warren to see himself in this job. And frankly, the Bears have been so poorly managed through the years that really anything you do, you can't help but to be better than what it's been. And so maybe this is just kind of where his heart is. And again, he did a really good job with Big Ten in challenging circumstances, and wish him the best. I'm going to miss working with him.
The next part is this. The next commissioner, whomever that may be, the TV contract is in place. The UCLA-USC integration has already started. It feels like that person, the heavy lifting stuff is a couple of years down the road. So how important will it be for them to have now a proper transition without the pressure of those items?
I do think that's important. I will say this. I mean, UCLA and USC, that onboarding is going to be a challenging proposition.
Yes.
So I do, to do it right and to make everyone feel welcome and to kind of have everyone feel integrated and to make it seem seamless in much the same way that I think that happened, long ago with Penn State, more recently, obviously, with Nebraska and Rutgers and Maryland. That is, that's right there. That's like front and center. I mean, when you think about going through this process and hiring someone and getting them going, I mean, it will be pretty immediate when they start that job. So to me, that's the biggest part of it. There's so much else going on in college sports, as you know, and so I think this person's going to have to be nimble in terms of being a good consensus builder, getting the Big Ten to kind of come up with a uniform plan of where they stand on some of the pressing issues in college sports, cognizant of the fact that some of those issues now are out of their hands, right? That a lot of the kind of bigger things that we're dealing with are in the hands of the courts. And so there's part of that where, you kind of need to see how some of these legal processes unfold. But I don't think that this is a job you're going to be able to ease into, maybe less so than Kevin, although I think part of what happened with Kevin obviously was just the unforeseen aspect of the pandemic, that the guy took over his job on January 2nd, and the thing was already kind of starting, right? We started talking about it probably about 2 or 3 weeks later, and 2 months later, obviously, you're canceling seasons, and the world is shaken upside down. And so you could have never anticipated that, and history will kind of say as to how much that impacted Kevin. Certainly early in his tenure, it was overwhelming, as it was for anyone in a business leadership position. And we don't know what the world will bring. He's a prime example of that, but I do think that UCLA and USC issue is going to be front and center from the get-go.
Well, there's no question about that because, as I pointed out there, the Big Ten, I think, sponsors 28 sports. When you're the commissioner of the NFL, you're responsible for 32 franchises. Well, you take 28 times 16, and you're talking, about 500 different sports teams that are under your umbrella. So being a conference commissioner is a little bit different animal in terms of integration of sports compared to it would be if you had an expansion team and decided to put it in Nashville.
Yeah, for sure. It is a massive job, and there's so many different components of it. I mean, everything from dealing with officiating to dealing with media rights partners to dealing with fans, student athletes. I will say this with Kevin Warren. I mean, student athlete welfare was front and center for him from the very first moment that I met him and talked to him. We had breakfast together, and he talked about some of the initiatives that ended up coming to pass that were really important to him about making student athletes citizens of the world and helping them understand that there was a life beyond and after college athletics and helping make them aware of all the things that were going on around them. And he did a brilliant job of doing that. And it was something that was really, really important to him. And those are things you don't necessarily think about as when you think about the role of a college commissioner. So there are so many different components to this. I do think one of the things, I was talking with Joel Klatt on our show today, and he kind of brought up this notion of you've got to surround yourself with really good people. And I think more than ever, it's going to be really important to have like a great deputy commissioner, to have people who can kind of handle all of these other aspects, because it is an all-encompassing job. I mean, the vastness of it almost boggles the mind, Steve. Yeah. It almost feels like too much for one person to handle, although it's not. I mean, there are people who are doing it. But it's every single minute of every single day. And so I do think it needs to be someone who can kind of dive in feet first, who knows that world, who understands college sports, but also is nimble enough to know there are lots of other forces that you wouldn't traditionally think of as being part of college sports and now are.
One final question, Dave, before I let you go, because I know you're really busy. How much do you think it helped Kevin's perspective when you talk about student athletes, that as he was commissioner of the conference, he had a student athlete already in his family that he could at least talk to and relate to about what he was going through?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, and he was a student athlete himself. He began his basketball career at Penn, ended up transferring home to Grand Canyon near his home in Phoenix. But I do think that's a huge part of it. He came from a family of student athletes as well. Yep. Siblings that played college sports. So his daughter was a runner. So, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why he saw it as big picture-wise. I think that's why he understood kind of, hey, this is, it is the trite, whatever it is, 98% will go pro in something other than sports. And, I know people roll their eyes maybe a little bit at that, but it's true. Like, it is true. And so if we're not kind of serving all of these other aspects of student athletedom, then we're getting it wrong. And so I think that was what Kevin, I think Jim was really attuned to that too. I mean, Jim Delaney was an athlete who was starting guard on the Final Four team, played for one of the all-time legends and Dean Smith. So I'm not in any way, and I know you're not implying that, but I'm saying like this wasn't a foreign concept. But I think like it became a centerpiece for Kevin. It was really, really important to him. And yeah, I do think that's informed by the people that are in your life, just like anything you do in a leadership role is.
My friend, thanks a lot for squeezing us in today. We really appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Steve. Always great to talk to you, buddy.